Hello, my name is Fred Valles. I'm your host today for another episode of PPC Town Hall. I'm also one of the co-founders and the CEO at Optmyzr. So we're almost in 2023, and when you work in paid search, it's never boring. Things are always changing. Add on top of all the changes that Google is making, some things that we're not sure about in the economy. How is that looking? So we thought we'd do a roundup with a bunch of PPC experts who sent us videos about what they think is going to happen in PPC in 2023. We also have Julie Friedman-Bacchini and Amalia Fowler, who are our panelists. So they'll be commenting and giving their own take on what they think is going to happen. So this should be a fun episode. Please don't watch this after 2023, because then you'll just see how wrong we may have been or how right we would have been. If we're right, we'll send this out again. If we're wrong, don't watch it again. But welcome to another episode of PPC Town Hall. All right, and here are my guests for today, Amalia Fowler and Julie Friedman-Bacchini. Amalia, let's start with you. How's it going?
It's going really well. Thank you. I'm really excited to be here.
Where are you calling us from today?
Vancouver, British Columbia, Canada, where there is no snow at the moment. But when there was, it took people like 8 to 10 hours to get home. So that whole myth about Canadians being really good in the snow just does not apply to the West Coast at all.
Interesting. Julie, how's it going with you?
Things are good. Lots of excitement here as we head into the end of the year. Little kids, child in the house always makes for exciting time this time of year, and wrapping everything up and trying to figure out what the heck to do and plan for 2023.
Nice. Before we started rolling here with the show, we were talking about having kids in the house and how that means basically parents are always covered in glitter. I feel like I've got some glitter on my face that I just cannot get off. My kids hug me and I'm like, no, please don't. Keep the glitter off of me. But it's great to have both of you on the show today. So let's start here with the first topic. And it's not really directly PPC related, but it's a bit about the economy, right? So some people see gloom and doom for next year. Some people say this year should have been gloom and doom. 2022 was like 2022, which wasn't great. But so what are both of you seeing? And Julie, let's start with you. What do you think about the economy heading into 2023?
I feel like it could go in a number of different directions. We talked some about, I've lived through multiple cycles of recession since I've been doing this forever. There are definitely some signs now in the marketplace that point towards some rough sledding heading into 2023. But honestly, we've had these signs have been here kind of heavily for the last quarter to quarter and a half. And the performance hasn't been fantastic in Q3 and Q4 here in 2022, but it hasn't been as bad as maybe it seemed like it would be when you were just looking at some of the indicators. So I don't know. I'm feeling a little unsure. I think there's probably going to be some rough sledding in the macroeconomic sense. But to what extent, I'm not 100% sure.
Yeah, it's a big unknown, right? Amalia, what's your take on the economy?
Yeah, I work with a lot of smaller businesses, so I think they feel the impact probably a little bit faster. I see the signs from them a little bit faster than I do from my clients that spend, $40, $50, $60,000 a month. And there has been a slowdown in a lot of different areas with people putting off big purchases or, delaying replacing their furnace, for example, or that kind of thing. We are seeing that. But what I caution myself and what I want to caution everyone else against doing is immediately assuming downturns in performance are economically based. Like, instead of investigating into the stats and the work that you're doing and being like, what cause and effect, what could I have impacted here? I do see this jump to, it's the economy. And that's a really easy hop, skip, and leap to make. But we should still be looking at our own work first as a potential cause and effect. I do think it is going to be a little bit bumpy, but honestly, we survived 2020. These businesses made it through 2020. I don't think they should be too concerned about 2023. Trying to get all the years right in my brain.
That's a great point. I mean, we work in one of the most measurable industries. So, if you see things trending the wrong way, you can still dial back and make optimizations and kind of get in front of it, right? You're not going to be at the end of the quarter, oh my God, we spent that much money. Like, I had no clue we didn't get conversions. But let's hear one of our video contributors. So we had a lot of people sending in videos. We asked a number of experts. So Jon Kagan is going to tell us about maybe a little bit of a rise in CPCs, and then let's get your take on that. So let's see what Jon had to say.
Hello, this is Jon Kagan with 9 Rooftops, and I'm here to give you my quick perspective on 2023 in search. Honestly, based off the obscenely high growth that we started seeing for CPCs in April of this year, I am expecting our Q1 of 2023 to be astronomically high cost search growth levels that we've probably never seen before. Just to get the same amount of traffic we previously had, we'll probably be spending 25%, up to 25% more just to get the same amount. It's a little bit discouraging, but we have seen just obscene growth in the cost for that one. So when you look at year one or Q1 from a year-over-year perspective, you're likely going to see a pretty hefty growth in costs, well beyond what you typically deal with.
Reactions to that increase in costs that he's predicting?
He's not wrong. That's my reaction, Jon. I think Jon is spot on. I was going through an account yesterday, and I think part of the, I don't want to say problem, but part of the cause, I think it's two-part. The first is the way close variants have changed in keywords, and the fact that a lot of smaller businesses or a lot of advertisers don't understand how to mitigate that. So they're entering auctions that they weren't entering before that may not be relevant, which is driving up everybody's costs. And then the second piece to that is just with automated bidding that's conversion-based, there's limited CPC control. Now you can do portfolio bidding strategies, which helps to mitigate that, but then you end up with less traffic overall. So it's this big balancing act that I'd say a lot of advertisers don't know how to manage. And I mean, there was a $41 click for my brand's own name yesterday in an account. And it's like, well, they can't afford that.
Right. But you also make a good point that like industry analysts for years and years on investor calls, they keep talking about CPCs are going up or CPCs are going down. It's like, I don't care so long as I get conversions within like my CPA target or my ROAS is at the level that I need it to be, right? So, and in your case, fine, $41 click for your brand. Maybe that doesn't make sense, right? That's why you have automation layering to catch that stuff. But generally speaking, if I have to pay $10 for a click instead of $8 for a click, but my cost per acquisition is still good because Google's AI is finding me those conversions, then who cares that the CPC is a little bit higher, right? The CPC is not my main business metric. Julie, what's your take on what Jon was saying there with those CPCs going up?
I mean, I think the consensus in the industry is that they're definitely going up. It's not equal across all industries either. I think there are a number of factors at play, but I think everybody has seen the increase in CPCs, and it's been inequitable. Whether you're seeing an increase in conversions along with that increase in CPCs, or you're just seeing your cost per click going higher. So I think for the industries and the businesses where your costs might be going up, but your conversions are also going up, they're a lot happier than the ones who just feel like their cost is going up and they're flat on conversions or they're getting fewer conversions. Though that's where I think it's a bit hairier. Because the businesses that are in those space, those advertisers are not feeling like you're describing, Fred, where it's like, oh, well, it costs more, but we're getting more. If you're in that bucket, you're feeling great. If you're in the other bucket, you're like, am I going to have to increase my annual budget for Google, let's say 25%, just to keep the same baseline, in sales and conversions that I have going here in 2022. And for a lot of businesses, that's a big deal.
Well, and you tie the economy back into this conversation and you have a higher ticket item that you are now paying more to get a lead from, but then the people are not generating the leads because they're not spending the money on the higher ticket items. Like, it ties kind of both of those points together, where I am seeing that in a lot of my service-based industries where people are putting off those big purchases, but cost per clicks are increasing. And so the combination, like you said, those are not happy advertisers.
Exactly. So you got to look at everything, right? And Jon also had something to say about demand. So let's hear what he said on that.
The demand, however, shouldn't change. We've still seen demand remain rather constant and flat. There's still that desire for the shop, and we really correlate demand when it goes hand in hand with unemployment rate. The higher the unemployment rate, the lower the demand, and we have not yet seen that. So fingers crossed that we don't see an uptick in unemployment levels. We should still expect to see the same level of demand, and then it's just us having to deal with our costs. Google's Performance Max may be an answer to help reduce costs. We have seen initial signs that their CPCs may be cheaper, but the entire platform is much of a black box, so it's really hard to decipher if it's going to help us out in the long run or not.
So that's his perspective. That makes a lot of sense. There is one other thing that I wanted to bring in here from a different expert. So Mike Ryan, he was talking about a correction in supply chain, right? So it's all good and well when we can manage the CPCs and the CPA and the ROAS, but ultimately a lot of the advertisers we work with have had struggles just putting products on the shelves or being able to deliver on time. And so let's hear what he had to say about 2023.
Regarding like the economic picture, I see that, a possible upside of a downturn is cooling demand, which could start to gradually straighten out the supply chain whiplash that we've had from shortage to surplus, and also maybe cool off inflation a little bit.
And then there was a final contribution that we'll take a look at from Kasim Aslam.
When a major change or shift happens, wait for people like me to take all the bullets. I should be taking all the arrows for you. I manage $70 million in spend. Like I can actually make those mistakes and absorb them because I can spread those mistakes evenly across multiple clients that A, stand to benefit in a way that you might not, and B, it's not going to be a catastrophic error for them. So unless you're in that same space, I wouldn't be too aggressive with trying to capture market share in that way. I think right now is a time for caution. It's a time for prudence. It's a time for very intentional moves. Make very intentional moves. Measure twice, cut once. Again, tighten your belt. Be ready for anything. And for those of us that are liquid, be ready to buy. Maybe that means buy traffic. Maybe that means buy your competitor. Maybe that means buy the building you're in. I don't know.
Yeah. So, what do you think about his advice about being cautious there?
I mean, I like it, but I naturally tend cautious anyways. I'm certainly not $7 million in spend managing ad accounts and clients. So I tend to lean to the side of caution with everything as it comes to new and automation and the environment that we're in. So like I'm happy to let them take all the hits on my behalf.
I liked his point about being deliberate. I think that it's easy to be kind of reactionary when you have things going on that can feel a little bit volatile, whether it's things that are happening inside of the platform or it's things happening outside, in the general economy. It can be tempting to be very reactive and to not really think through maybe how you want to adjust your strategy and just kind of have some knee-jerk reactions. Sometimes clients can, freak out a little bit if there's a particular day or week or month that seems to go haywire. I think so. His point about being deliberate, I think that's a great advice, like anytime, frankly, but it's really good advice when things are bumpy or unsteady or unsure. So I think taking on the role of being sort of like the calming force, right? Being the one who's like, let's take a breath and let's think about, what we want to do. To Amalia's point earlier, let's look at our number. Let's look at our data. What's in here? What can we work with? And how do we want to move forward based on the information that we have right now?
And so let's be cautious, let's be calm, let's be reasonable. Kasim had another point that he made. So let's hear that for just a second.
That I think 2023 is going to be an economic bloodbath. And I do have some data points that are, independent of what other people might be drawing against, which is the fact that we've managed $70 million in ad spend. And because of that, I can see on a micro level impacts and changes to ecosystems that under closer analysis would lend themselves to the idea that there's going to be something of a downturn or a correction. And you might say, well, maybe the correction is already built into the market. And I might say, you're probably right. If I was an economist or a good one, I'd be a wealthier person than I am. All of that to say, I think that it would be imprudent to not at least hedge your bets. And so, that's less of a Google Ads recommendation than it is an economic recommendation. But, for a lot of businesses, you already know what that means, depending on the industry that you're in. You might be careful about hiring or fulfillment or pipeline or whatever that means for you as far as tightening your belt, tighten your belt.
I think communication really comes into play here because so many of us are in agency and so many of us work with clients like at a distance as opposed to being on client side. And so I need to know what my client is planning so that I can plan accordingly from the advertising side. And in turn, I should be giving them the data that they need to make decisions about their marketing. And I think so many times that link gets so broken, or we're not proactive about that communication. So we don't tell them what we see. We don't explain the higher cost per click. We don't translate what that means for their overall results. And in turn, they don't tell us what's going on in their end with supply chain or with the leads that they're seeing that are turning into actual business for them. And so I would just say that communication needs to be such a focus for everyone. And so often it is the last thing that we think about in our space. So that's really what that made me think of.
Yeah, and that's solid advice for any time of the year. It's the last thing we focus on, maybe because we're too busy building creatives and doing manual repetitive work. But I think 2023, everybody will agree, it's the year of automation. Okay, it's been the year of automation.
Again?
Exactly.
What is it, 5? Is it the 5th year in a row now?
It feels like it.
But I think 2023 is legitimately going to be different because the type of things we've seen now with AI, especially stuff coming out of OpenAI, the way it's able to write text for us, I think it's going to become quite helpful for advertisers. In Optmyzr, we've already integrated some AI-based text suggestions. So it'll basically look at the history of what you've used for responsive search ad headline components, and it'll say, here might be a couple of variations that might be worth testing out. So let's shift to that topic of automation. And Julie, let's start with you. What's your broader take on what automation is going to matter the most in 2023 and how it's going to change PPC?
I mean, I think we've crossed past that point of like, oh, automation is coming, right? Like we've been hearing about it for so many years that we're joking about it, like, oh yes, it's the year of automation again. But I think this, even like here in 2022, certainly, and heading into 2023, the pace and the scope at which automation is involved in what's happening inside of your accounts, I think it's increased a lot in 2022. And I don't see that slowing down in 2023. We had PMAX rolling out. We've had the changes in the way that things are matching. We had the big push for broad match and smart bidding. Like none of that's going away. So we're going to have all that still in play that we're trying to figure out how to work with. And then who knows what other pieces? We had the end of expanded text ads. It's all the RSAs now. So, I mean, there's a ton of automation in play, whether you're fully utilizing all the automated capabilities. So it's already a part of everything that we're doing. And I don't see that slowing down. It's not going to retreat. This train's going to keep moving forward.
Exactly. We'll talk about PMAX too, which is sort of like, hey, all this AI, you're forced to use it and it can drive good results. And then there's the AI that we can choose to use at this point. We still have control over. And do we use DALL-E to generate images for us? Do we use GPT-3 and GPT-4 that's coming for text generation? Amalia, what's your take on automation?
That I have to get on board now. I laugh at year one me because I was like, never, ever, no automation. And like throwing a very newbie temper tantrum about changes in the industry. And if only I could see myself today. I think primarily my I always look at it from a professorial, like academic lens, because I teach Google Ads to college students in addition to executing it. So one thing I can agree with totally with what Julie is saying is the pace of change. Like, I will build a slide deck and change it sometimes the next day before I teach students, because things are changing so quickly. I think that those of us who are attached to our control may have to start to really let that go and just dive in and test, or rely on the experts who do have those large spends and who are testing and who are publishing, to give us a different lens into ways we can use this automation. Because at this point, keeping up with the automation is practically a full-time job. Like, you could probably have someone assigned to looking into all of these things for 40 hours a week. So I don't love it. I'm learning to love it.
All right, Amalia. So Patrick Gilbert, he wrote a book, Join or Die. Basically, we have to get you to join so you don't die.
So that I don't die. I talked to Patrick, actually reading that book, Join or Die, shifted my views considerably. That, and talking to Aaron Levy, I think at SMX 2018, was another conversation that shifted how I think about it. So I try and look at it from a less an on-board but cynical lens. Like, I put them together now instead of I use the automation.
Let's hear what Patrick had to say about automation.
I think 2023 is when we're all going to learn collectively how to work with this technology more productively. We're going to stop pushing back as much, and we're going to embrace it and learn how to really work effectively as marketers. In the past year, a lot of products have been put in the hands of the everyday consumer. Products like Midjourney, DALL-E, and then just over the last weekend, essentially, GPT-3. These types of tools have democratized AI by giving access to everybody in the world, where now all these different people, whether it's marketers or anybody else, are now learning how to work with and optimize and manipulate AI to achieve, whether it's creating artwork or paragraphs or whatever it might be. I think now all of us are collectively learning more about how to better work with AI, and it's going to translate into our marketing campaigns. In this coming year, I expect us to all have a better understanding and better and better respect for the work that we can do alongside AI. So things, whether it's bidding, budget decisions, media placements, attribution modeling, creative testing, anything else having to do with our digital advertising campaigns, I think all of us are going to collectively learn a whole lot more about how to leverage AI to drive better performance outcomes.
All right, Amalia, are you revved up after that kind of talk from Patrick?
Yes, let's do it. Let's get on board. No, he's not wrong. There are, I think, ethical implications to the addition of AI in a lot of different ways, just from what is a trademark and copyright perspective. If we are using it to write text and create images, those images are the AI is learning from someone else's work. So I think that, and the legislative piece is one that's going to come in future years. But as we know, legislation does not always catch up with technology very quickly. So I think that's something that we still have to consider as we go. But it's certainly something that we all have to get on board with, even me.
Yeah, and then the other big gap here is there's the chatbot from OpenAI, and you can ask it questions and it gives great answers. And it can write blog posts and scripts for you, but it doesn't know anything that happened in the last 2 years because that wasn't part of the training model. And that's a huge gap, right? I mean, in our fast-moving space, a 2-year gap is major. And so then I think there's also the role that I've always described of the PPC teacher, right? The machine and its AI can only do the types of things it's seen us do in the past. And maybe it can be made more creative to explore new avenues and get feedback on that and do some reinforcement learning. But still, we'll have a major role to play. So, Julie, I'm kind of curious from you, have you played with any of these tools or talked to people who have, and what are you seeing there?
I haven't done a lot with the newer. I know the GPT, the chat that has been all over everywhere. So everyone's been having a good time with that, and it's been fun seeing the things that it generates. I'd be interested to see what it does, when you're trying to do it, and not just isn't this fun? I asked it this silly question, or I asked it to create something in this style. How well it would do. I think that knowledge gap though is huge. So much has happened in the last 2 years, both in our industry and in society at large. So that is a tremendous blind spot as far, as far as I'm concerned. I think, we are going to have to figure out the places where we can have influence and we can differentiate what we're doing for the brands that we work with versus what the system and the automation wants to do. I mean, that's really where our industry is going. So I think starting to have that be your mindset now, while we still have a fair number of options, will serve you well heading into 2023 and beyond.
And really, everyone has to become a strategist. There's like, as this continues to go, I don't think there's anybody who's left it just the tactical tactician role. Like, you have to use the context of your business and the context of the data to then edit and change and address and direct the AI. It can rewrite. So I have played with it, and I put in, like, if you put in a student assignment, for example, it will make it better. So from an academic side, this has huge implications for students' writing skills, and you can't detect it as plagiarism the same way that you used to be when someone stole something online. So I think it's going to require a massive shift in a whole bunch of areas. And for us, that focus should be strategic and editing and adjusting what the AI does, I think, instead of doing so much on the tactical side. I think we're going to all have to become a little bit more strategic.
Yeah. And we need layers of protection, right? So I'm wondering about the factualness and the correctness of, when it takes an academic paper and it's like, oh, well, I found this one reference here that says helium is heavier than air. And no, that's not true, right? And hopefully it figures that out because there's more references that say the correct thing. But we've all seen how even a search engine like Google can be tricked into showing very specific things about very specific people that are incorrect because, the community went and said it was so. And then, as advertisers, so what if the system now writes a new ad text that says, hey, half off or 60% off? Because guess what? It's going to get a pretty good click-through rate and a pretty good conversion rate, right? But is it actually what your business wants to do? So we just need humans to make sure that what the machine is doing is within the boundaries of what our business wants. Now, speaking of the man who was calling bloodbaths and stuff and doom and gloom, what does he think about automation? So let's hear from Kasim for a minute.
I think they're going to be really interesting. I think they're going to be category kingmakers. And I think that automation is actually going to benefit small businesses and probably inhibit agencies a little bit. I'll never say the agency days are numbered because that just has never been true. Even with massive shifts in medium, agencies will always be a necessary evil. And I do believe we're evil, by the way.
All right. So agencies, are your days numbered?
No. Partially because of what you just said. So there's always going to be mistakes in the AI. There's always going to be things that need addressing, and small businesses, while it does give more options to small businesses, they don't understand how to address those things the same way that agencies do. And small businesses, by their nature, are always going to have people wearing multiple hats. They are always going to have people who can't focus 100% of their time on marketing, on Google Ads, on this kind of thing. So I think the agency's role still exists. I think it shifts into what it is offering small businesses. As someone who exclusively works with small businesses, that's how I feel about this.
I think, it's interesting hearing him say he thinks this is going to be more beneficial for small businesses versus agencies. I don't know that I agree with that. I think that small businesses, they don't have the runway a lot of times to let the machine learning or the AI figure stuff out while they're paying for it. And I think the expectation in paid search certainly is that isn't how it works. Right? That you can be pretty particular about what you're targeting and how you're targeting it and all of those things. And that has become muddied over time, but the AI takes liberties when it's learning and it's doing different things. And I think the size of the business, their tolerance for that, I think is an important factor that we don't talk about a lot, because larger businesses have a much bigger tolerance for that. A smaller business, they might run, Google Ads for 3 months, and the AI and the machine learning might still be learning during that whole period. So it's all over the place. At the end of that 3 months, it's not unlikely that small business would be like, you know what, we're just not getting any return on this, right? And maybe they would have if they'd stuck with it for another couple of months. But I think that there's going to be a fair number that just kind of bug out after that period of time.
Well, and I think automation is title of my book, Leveling the Playing Field. My book was Unlevel the Playing Field. How do you tip it back into your favor? But it is leveling the playing field, right? Because I think as a small business, there was a lot of frustration historically with Google Ads, and that it was difficult to manage, and you'd set it up incorrectly, and you'd have like this crazy broad match keyword, and then you'd be spending all this money on the wrong thing. Automation is largely preventing that sort of stupidity from happening and bringing you up to that next level. But to your point, Julie, does the small business know how to correctly measure and attribute that these things are actually growing the business, or are they just looking at, bottom line of the business might be going into a recession, right? So things are going to look worse. And could they have been much worse than they are now if you hadn't been doing PPC? Like if you don't know how to set up conversion tracking, if you don't know how to track phone calls that come into your business, if you don't know how to properly answer the phone and actually like sell that lead that Google just generated, then you're still going to be unhappy no matter how much better the system is at showing ads automatically and picking the right keywords and putting in the right audiences, right? So it's this more holistic picture that I think Google has solved one of the problems, but is still a long way away from solving that attribution and measurability problem.
And I'll be honest, I still don't think they've solved the first problem. I talk to small businesses all the time who are confused about Google Ads, who don't know how to set it up, who still end up with those wrong broad match keywords because, they're a fruit stand and they type in the word banana instead of the word fruit stand. And it's like, well, now the ads are showing on everything related to bananas, and that's not what their intent was. So Theoretically, it is easier, but I'm still going in and fixing a lot of problems on that side. And Julie, I know that you probably agree with me on this one.
Yeah, I think, again, it's the solutions that Google offers are often more successful and less successful. It's sort of stratified as far as what's happening among advertisers. And they like to focus on, the ones that it's working well for. And like, that's great. Of course they're going to do that, right? Like they're not going to focus on where it's not working when they're talking about it. But I think it can be frustrating both for people who work with smaller entities to keep, hearing all the rah-rah, everything's so awesome and this stuff works so beautifully and, get on board when you're like, yeah, it's not working as great for, the people that I'm working with. Like we're struggling sometimes.
I've got a solution. Should we just get rid of the keyword in 2023?
Oh my gosh.
Let's hear what Navah Hopkins had to say on keywords.
The future of the keyword. So here's the thing. I've been thinking that keywords were going to die and just fade into nothingness for the past maybe 3-4 years, and they're still here. Essentially with close variants taking more and more and more control, audiences being prevalent, PMAX on the rise, which really does not use any keywords at all. So here's the thing with keywords. Keywords are signals, just like audiences are signals. And what's really fascinating is that broad match allows for more signals than phrase and exact. So I really don't think the idea of semantic search is viable anymore if you're building account structure off of that. But I do think the idea of giving Google signals, and this is true within PMAX campaigns, you can build keyword lists as signals, not as semantic search. So I do think that keywords as ideas and keyword concepts and keyword champions will still exist, but they're not going to be the main lever that we pull, and they haven't really been for a long time. What will be the main lever? Audiences for sure, which is why that first party data question is important, that you can have that customer match list, upload, keep that as a core audience, but also being mindful we may have to release control a little bit and lean into the automatic signals, provided that we use negative keywords. So I don't ever see negative keywords going away because those are our protectors, those are our guardrails. But keywords as active targets, I do see them fading in significance, particularly for PMAX. If you're still running traditional search campaigns, obviously you're still using keywords. And in those cases, please just make sure that you're accounting for the fact that close variants apply for regular keywords, but not for negative. So if you're building count structures from way back when semantic search reigned supreme, you really are going to have to do some cleanup. But if you've been building for the way keywords have been behaving right now, honestly, whether you make keywords you're guiding light, audiences you're guiding light, it's essentially the same thing at this point. You're putting in signals that are going to drive profit. Cheers.
So did Navah just solve all of our problems with people picking bad keywords?
No, but I don't think she's incorrect in what she's saying. I'm such a keyword person that it frustrates me. I do think they are going to go away, though. I will disagree with Navah on that point. I think Google's taking their time because they just know what an uproar it will cause. So they're like slowly taking away one thing at a time so that by the end, we're just exhausted and no one fights anymore. I do see what Navah's saying there in terms of it being more of a signal like audiences. And we are seeing more keyword-less campaigns. Like I just launched a Google's Thing to Do campaign. It's a beta with a tourism client. There's no keywords. It's just a feed that they're using to generate search ads. And so I do think that we're trending in that direction. Do I like it? No. Do I think tying it back to the small business conversation, do I think small businesses know to layer audiences on to give additional signals? Do I think that they know how to give how to signal Google what the actual intent is? No. And do I think that's going to become a bigger problem for them? Yes. But I don't think Navah's wrong in her prediction here. I just don't like it.
Julie, do you like it?
I hate it. I'm sitting here thinking, and again, I don't disagree with what she's saying. Navah's very smart. But I'm sitting here thinking, she's talking about it. And I'm thinking, you know what signal I want to send to Google? The exact query that matches to what it is I'm trying to sell to somebody. Like that's the signal as a PPC manager and as an advertiser and as a business is the most important signal. It's the strongest intent signal you can possibly have. So for as long as I'm able, I am going to keep sending that signal to Google and hope that they, continue to take it into consideration. I mean, obviously, we're all going to adapt to whatever we have to adapt to, right? Like we don't really have a choice. We complain about it on Twitter, which is good, healthy, get it out. But then at the end of the day, we got to figure out how to maneuver. Like, how do we make this work? How do we make this work for the brands that we're working with? And I think it's wise to think about keywords continuing to be de-emphasized. But strictly from a data input standpoint, that makes me crazy because I think there is no stronger signal that a search engine could take than an actual keyword, especially if you're an established account and you know what drives conversions and you know what doesn't. So
100% agree with the sentiment. I think that signal. So I'll argue that there's actually a different signal besides that exact keyword that you care about. It's just about better reporting conversions. Because at the end of the day, I mean, there could be this crazy search someone does, and it's like, oh my God, that triggered something in their brain, and now they bought that thing that you were selling, right? If the AI gets good enough to figure that out, then it's about communicating what was that sale, how much value did I get from it, so how much money could the system have spent on it, on my bid. And I think that's still the thing that too many businesses, and I think you'll both agree with this, we see too many companies who set this up incorrectly, or they go only halfway. They're like, well, somebody filled out a form, that's my lead, that's my conversion, right? Sure, that's your lead, but that's not your sale. That's not what you're actually trying to achieve. And so if we can help our advertisers do that better, then the AI is going to get better information about, okay, all of these crazy broad match keywords that I tested, what actually paid off and what should I do more of?
And I think that's why e-commerce clients have a lot more success with these automation innovations than lead gen clients do, because that signal is so much stronger, because that signal has a dollar amount attached to it. You know that actually caused a purchase. Whereas on my side, which is a lot of lead gen, we get a lot of competitor keywords that get prioritized because people just see the ad, they call the business, the call is the only conversion they have. And so until I can get offline conversion data uploaded into Google Ads or make a connection to something like Service Titan for my HVAC clients, that data is still at the base level incorrect for Google to then make decisions off of. So I think that's why we see, especially with like Performance Max, e-commerce clients are doing a lot better. Whereas in lead gen, those signals are still very weak. And so I think that's an excellent point about closing the loop. But many advertisers don't understand how to close that loop.
Yeah, I think Kasim was on a PPC Town Hall episode, and he was like, this is the $1 trillion opportunity, is how to correctly report it. By the way, Optmyzr has some cool things coming out in 2023 that are going to make that much easier. But because I completely agree, like in e-commerce, the reason people have better data is because it's so much more tightly integrated. So it's basically click and install and it works. But it doesn't work for lifetime value, right? That's where you have to start doing more work. Whereas I think on the lead gen side, to even get to the base level of correctness, it's a lot of work. And so we're going to try to make that easier. I know Google's going to try to make that easier because I don't think it's a $1 trillion problem, but it is big enough that it's probably one of the biggest opportunities in PPC for the next couple of years. But let's shift and talk a bit about PMax. So, and this is going to shift back a little bit to e-commerce, but Mike Ryan was talking a little bit about enhancements coming to Merchant Center and how that might relate to PMax. So let's hear from Mike.
Regarding PMax becoming a little bit more mature on the market, I think we'll see 3 camps. These are like hackers, the people who want to keep trying to find novel ways of using PMax, maybe in ways it wasn't intended. We'll see harmonizers who are going to focus on what is the role of PMax in an account, like how do all the different campaign types really play together in the best way. And we're going to see more people start walking away.
Walking away from PMax. I wish we could.
Does it count as walking away if I haven't used it yet? Does it count as walking?
Yeah, you never showed up at the party, huh?
No, I did in one account. I couldn't let myself never use it, but I did it in an account that has a lot of runway. So that has the testing budget that I was like, let me drop $3,000 on this campaign that I'm 90% convinced is not going to work for you. And they said yes. But my clients that had less of a budget, I never walked into it.
Yeah, I mean, so I don't know if you walked away then or just didn't explore it further. But honestly, that's kind of what we're hearing too. For some people, it works great. Other people, it doesn't work well. There's no rhyme or reason to when it does, when it doesn't. And I think, like we've discussed quite a bit here, it's really about feeding the system better signals and then trying to do the most you can with those signals. But you really got to stay on top of what is it doing. There's still the lack of transparency in it, right? So I think for a lot of the advertisers that say they see great results, are they truly incremental results? Is it truly from one of the sub channels that they cared about? It's unknown, right? It's difficult to get that level of insight.
Is it brand? I mean, the fact that the brand stuff is by default rolled into Performance Max, and then it's like, check us out. Our numbers are amazing, and you're like, yeah, but you've got a bunch of brand in there. Like, let's be real for a second. So I think, there's a lot of that going on. There's a lot of that going on too. And like, so we're very dialed in, right? In the PPC community where everybody's talking about that. And how do you get the brand stuff dropped out of there? Because that's skewing the performance numbers and all that. But if you step back to the level where you're talking about advertisers using Performance Max who maybe don't have somebody professional managing it who even knows that that's an issue, they might be looking at those numbers having no clue that they've got a ton of brand stuff happening in there and thinking like, this is amazing, right? But they don't, the calibration and the perspective that they need to have for it isn't there. So I find that whole thing fascinating. I mean, it's obviously Google can put out great numbers, because brand is like the strongest performing campaign for most businesses. So why not roll that in there and make all your average stuff, puff it up and make it look better.
I feel like I need to redeem myself. So I believe in Performance Max as a concept. I'm just going to say that straight up. Like it's not part of the, like, I can't handle automation, I'm never going to explore it. I believe in it as a concept. However, I think it works better for e-commerce, again, because it can isolate the networks. And my 2 main issues are the lack of transparency and the lack of ability to control things like negative keywords. And then the second one is brand safety. I have brands who get emails when they're in someone's Gmail account or when they're on a display placement that doesn't make sense for their brand. They get screenshots. And so just if you have a brand like in legal or in financial where you have to be careful about where your ads are, like it's just a non-starter in those situations. So until they offer us more control from a negative placement, from maybe a network that's very hopeful, it's probably not going to happen. And definitely from a negative keyword perspective, while in theory it's a great idea and I have nothing against it in that regards, there has to be more control for me to roll it out for most of my clients. That's just the way it is.
So one of the things I think there with PMAX that we haven't talked about much is maybe audiences, right? And so how do you use first-party data as one of the few controls that you maybe still have? So let's hear from Navah about collecting some first-party data to use in PPC.
One of the really interesting things about collecting first-party data is it's essentially a consensual conversation. If you create an experience that people are excited to engage with and they want to share their information with you because they know that you're going to respect it and you're going to give them something useful in return, it's a no-brainer. So essentially think about user behavior when you're asking for cookie consent. Make it an easy to read, easy to understand module. Be very clear about what it is that you're tracking. And on the subject of emails and phone numbers, offers are really helpful. Gamification is really, really helpful. But the most important thing is that you're not annoying the user in collecting that information. So as a general rule of thumb, the technical time frame is 5 to 8 seconds before you ask for anything or do any pop-ups. That's for cumulative layout shift or CLS. However, I would actually encourage you to wait maybe 20, even 30 seconds. And the reason for that is that the human mind needs time to process and take things in. You also don't want to get in the way of an engaged session. You might have a perfect user, but if you annoy them and put things right up in front, they aren't able to really engage.
So Amalia, let's start with you. What's your take on the cookie going away and what should advertisers be doing in 2023 to get more of that first-party data?
Yeah, absolutely. This is a big topic of conversation with me and my students as well. So my first take is that the cookie was supposed to be dead this year, right? Like it was supposed to be, wasn't it January 2022? So my first take is the cookie really going and where is it going? But my second take is we kind of have to prepare for both avenues. So we have to prepare for it to leave. And while it's still here, we can keep leveraging it. And to prepare for it to go, it is about collecting all that first party data and engaging in conversation with your users. I'm a big fan of the exit pop-up. Actually, I love Navah's point about you might have a perfectly engaged user and you're going to interrupt their process. I think we all get really tired of pop-ups. I personally, if I go to a site and there's like a pop-up for a newsletter, a pop-up for this, and I'm out. Like I don't want to be there anymore. So collecting that data, but then don't ignore them once you have it. That is the biggest mistake I see brands make is they have this customer list and then they don't engage with them. They don't send an email once a month. They don't use it they don't utilize it in the ad platforms. And that experience has to be something that adds value to your list's life. It cannot just be, oh, like the interns here, let's have them write an email. Sorry, poor interns. They're wonderful usually. They're just new. But it's like you can't just put your first idea on paper and you have to actually start that conversation. So if you're not prepared to start that conversation, then maybe reconsider, like put a little time gap before you start collecting that data. Because if you're not going to use it, it's almost a useless thing. And I would also argue actually that the average consumer doesn't know what they're consenting to when they click that button. And that's from teaching it. So I teach first party and third party cookies. I teach about how we gather information and what that means. And every single one of my students' mind, like you can see their mind get blown by the fact that like, this is how data is used. And so based on that, I'm extrapolating to the general population. So I think Navah's point of being really clear in what you're gathering and what you're going to use it for is something that's so important to earn trust with that consumer. Otherwise, you're going to run into issues later on down the line because they're going to get that email and unsubscribe and disengage from the conversation.
Makes sense. Julie, what are you doing?
All right. So I've been talking about this for a while now. as far as having your first party data and how you use it and what type of consent you actually have from the people who are on your list and in your database. We're being encouraged by all the platforms to upload customer data, upload customer data, upload customer data. I am encouraging all businesses and those of us who work on their behalf to look really hard at what your privacy policy says and what your terms say. If you're going to upload people's information into an ad platform, you should say that somewhere that they can reasonably find. Because I do not think it is a reasonable expectation that if I purchase something from you or if I sign up for your email list, that you're going to take my personal information and you're going to upload it into an ad platform. And I think I'm always thinking ahead. I'm thinking of like, what could go wrong? Like, how could you get into hot water? And this could turn into a very expensive problem potentially down the line with privacy regulations and that type of thing. So utilizing first party data as an advertiser has a ton of advantages, obviously, and the platforms really want us to do it. And so we need to be thinking in that way, but we want to protect ourselves as well and make sure that we're doing it in a way that is not going to come back around and bite us or bite the advertisers that we're working with down the line, because we're collecting this data and we're doing it ostensibly for one purpose, and then we're just turning around and using it however the heck we want. And the people who consented for the one thing did not consent for anything else. So that's what I have been shouting from the mountaintops this whole last year during this huge push for first party data, because I think it's so incredibly important.
And I will also say, on behalf of Canadians like me everywhere, please learn the regulations in places that are not the United States of America, because they are often more strict. And I cannot tell you the number of times a US-based business has actually violated our Canadian legislation with my data. And I just know this because I know the different legislations. I advise all my clients, whether or not they have people coming from the EU, to follow GDPR, because it is by far the most stringent regulation. So chances are, by following that, you are covering your bases elsewhere. But if you notice, when you upload that data into the platform, it tells you, like the Google button, it's like you've collected this properly, right? Like they're putting all the onus back on the advertiser with that little checkbox. And so this is not like the I read the terms and conditions, check the box without thinking it through moment. Like you've got to be clear about how you got that data, what people consented to, and what it's going to be used for.
Yeah, solid advice. I mean, obviously, don't get into legal trouble. But again, that said, first-party data is going to become much more important in 2023. So have a plan. And I sort of like, Amalia, what you were saying too, which was know what you want to do with that data, right? Because that's going to help convince people within the company that, yes, we should put time and effort into collecting it and also doing the legal things necessary to then do what we say or say what we do and be protected.
And communicate. Because chances are the people using that data in other ways, like on email marketing, are not within the agency. Right. So then it's like, that comes back to that communication piece from earlier.
All right. So let's shift here to a quick topic about video. So TikTok is this massive growing beast, but there's also YouTube Shorts kind of making a play for those same advertisers. So let's hear from Joe Martinez about these two platforms.
My prediction in 2023 is going to be related to vertical video. A question we get a lot from clients who are interested in doing more vertical video is, well, which one should I choose, Joe? TikTok or YouTube Shorts? Well, the ideal answer would be both, but I can only choose one. And for many of my clients who have mid to smaller budgets, I would say YouTube Shorts is the better route. And here's my prediction of why YouTube Shorts is going to be a silent killer in 2023. First, YouTube Shorts provides you with YouTube Analytics. And YouTube Analytics is a great tool to get really good insights on which videos are engaging the most and which ones are leading to additional actions like subscribers and conversions. We can get better information to create better content. Second, YouTube Shorts is a great way to boost your subscriber count. And when we see subscriber counts grow, that really helps our overall organic YouTube efforts, as well as anything else that we are doing on the channel. As we get more organic growth, then we start to see it impact other video things like the audiences that we can create for advertising. So you can see if you grow your YouTube Shorts, you can really help your overall video channels. And another thing that I've been hearing rumbling in the weeds is that YouTube Shorts is going to expand the time length. Currently, they're locked at 1 minute, and if they increase the length closer to the 3 minutes like we can do on TikTok, we can really see how we can add more watch time. And now that ads are starting to become on Shorts, you can get more revenue coming from YouTube Shorts, and it might be a bigger way for YouTube to compete with TikTok.
All right, great insight there from Joe. We also want to hear from Cory Henke, so let's play that next, and then we'll talk more between us.
Next, I really want to provide you with the fact that vertical video provides the best opportunity for reach, exposure, and conversion across 3 platforms. So it is the best way that I think you should go about things today when it comes to video. And so for Shorts, this is something where we know the least about, but the promise and the power of Google Ads really makes it a must test this year. And we have it active for the majority of our clients today. TikTok is, I think, the platform that has innovated the most in 2022. And I think that continues. It's allowed other platforms like Facebook and Instagram to take note, develop their own product, and also allow some new targeting capabilities that weren't there prior. So I think TikTok on the innovation path is got the longest runway. And then Reels, like I mentioned, their connection to shopping for e-commerce, I think is a huge advantage, but also Reels, I think for other advertisers outside of that, from a reach and engagement standpoint. So definitely can create that awareness that I think some brands are looking for. And ultimately, vertical is what I would say for 2023. And if you consider anything, it's testing across all these different platforms and then comparing and seeing where you might find success. And if you'd rather run something long form, I still think that YouTube skippable is a true advantage for anybody looking for somebody to spend a longer period of time. My name is Cory Henke. Thank you again for your time and have a wonderful day.
All right, so that's Joe and Cory. So any thoughts on TikTok versus YouTube Shorts?
I thought Joe's points about how the data gets into Google, you know, on like the Google platform when you're doing the shorts. That's a great point, especially if you're doing a bunch of other things inside of Google. And I saw something, I think it was this week, about the increase in the amount of time or the amount of reels that have been watched. So it's definitely on the rise. I know TikTok has obviously been taking up a lot of the oxygen when it comes to, you know, the shorter videos, and there's certainly success to be had there. But I'm really my wheels are turning thinking about what Joe was saying about you know, how it works in, and you can leverage different pieces of the rest of the Google ecosystem if you're doing the shorts.
I mean, these two are the video marketing experts that I turn to when I have questions about video. So both of their points are, I mean, I would say what I would go with. But I just want to bring it back for the advertisers to audience. Who are you speaking to? Because that would be my, if we're taking away the platform, the differences in abilities, I'm looking at who's watching. So who's on YouTube, who's on TikTok, who's on Instagram. They are different groups of people. And so my first decision-making point would be, who do I want this video to reach? And that would almost dictate my platform before anything else. The Google plays nicely with Google piece is a huge benefit for YouTube that obviously TikTok and Instagram don't have. But my primary concern would be, who am I speaking to and where are they? Because if I'm talking to like a Gen Z, I'm probably on TikTok or YouTube and TikTok. I'm not on Instagram at this point. And that's very demographically based. Obviously, you want to get more into the interests and needs of your audience over demographics, but there are differences in who watches each platform, and that should be on, in my opinion, an advertiser's primary concern before they decide where to place their media.
All right. So let's each make a final prediction for 2023. My final prediction is going to be Apple finally launches a search engine and we get another place to put ads, which we always welcome, right? If we're talking about TikTok versus YouTube, it's basically about getting more distribution. That's also about more upper funnel. But it would certainly be nice to see a privacy-oriented company like Apple coming out with their own search engine. DuckDuckGo had a good try, but honestly, I mean, it's not significant in the scheme of things for advertisers. I think Apple might have a better shot. So that's going to be my big prediction for 2023. Closing thoughts. Let's start with you, Julie. Any big predictions, and how do people get a hold of you?
Your Apple thought is very interesting. I know everybody's paying close attention to that. So that could happen. We've heard that rumor a lot. Maybe 2023 will be the year. I think the big thing that's going to happen in 2023 is regulation. I think, we've seen a lot happening. Obviously, the European area is the most advanced as far as regulating what's happening with data and what's happening in tech. I think that is going to continue. There's a lot of noise being made here in the U.S. So we'll see if anything comes from that. But that's going to be something that I'm going to be paying attention to, because I think we're going to see some regulations that we haven't had to deal with in the past coming into play. And then, of course, we'll have to deal with the fallout and what that means.
Seriously, Julie, I mean, here I've got the happy prediction of like, hey, more places to advertise here, like regulation.
I'm sorry to be a bummer. You want to know what I think the biggest thing's going to be? That's what I think the biggest thing's going to be. I could have said economic bloodbath, but that's already been covered. So yes. I'm going to go with regulation. And as far as where you can find me, I am currently very active on Twitter, hoping that stays that way. You can find me at Neptune Moon. And if you follow the PPC chat hashtag, you can find me there. I'm the managing director of PPC Chat, and I also have my own PPC consulting business through Neptune Moon. I'm very easy to find online.
Great. Thank you, Julie. Amalia, what about you?
My prediction is that I'll be sad about something in PPC that's coming out. No, I'm kidding. My actual prediction, I'm going to jump on the automation train, but I think my prediction is that because automation will continue to kind of level the playing field, that we will have to invest more into understanding our customer behavior and modifying our user experience. So we're going to have to focus more on our creative, on our site experience, on understanding who we're speaking to, because if how we deliver ads becomes more equitable, then we have to differentiate ourselves in new ways. So that's my big prediction for next year. As for where you can find me online, I am Amalia E. Fowler on Twitter. I have been in and out of that platform since our favorite billionaire took over. So who knows if I'm going to be around there, but that's the best place to find me, as well as LinkedIn. So feel free to follow me on LinkedIn. Again, it's just Amalia Fowler. Like Julie, I am incredibly easy to find online, for better or for worse. So if you just Google my name, you'll figure it out. But I have my own consulting firm. I do a lot of Google Ads audits. And so that's the best way to get in touch with me. I
think my favorite billionaire is Richard Branson.
Yeah, anyway. He's not actually my favorite billionaire, just to like be very clear about that. I just did not want to say his name.
So thank you both. You've been amazing guests. And also thank you to all the people who we asked and submitted videos to us to share some of their predictions. If you've enjoyed watching the show, please subscribe at the bottom. We also have ppctownhall.com where you can sign up for email notifications about the next episodes. You can also subscribe so it automatically gets added to your calendars. Myself, I'm at Silicon Valleys on Twitter when I still go on there once in a while. But yeah, thank you everyone for a great 2022. These were the 2023 predictions with Julie and Amalia. We hope to see you back next year. And whatever happens, I wish everyone lots and lots of success in their PPC campaigns. Ups and downs, lots of challenges, but we've been going through all of this kind of stuff for many, many years and always seem to come out okay. So I'm optimistic about 2023. Again, thanks for watching.